Life has a way of testing us when we least expect it. You might wake up feeling confident, calm, and ready to take on the day, but then something unexpected happens. Suddenly, everything feels like it's slipping out of your control. A sharp word from someone you care about, a mistake at work, a financial setback, or even something as small as getting stuck in traffic. These moments can feel overwhelming. It seems almost impossible to hold on to composure and clarity when everything around you feels like it's going wrong. But here's the truth most people overlook: staying calm in those moments is not about avoiding life's chaos, it's about how you respond to it. The Stoics, some of the most resilient thinkers in history, understood this better than anyone. They lived through wars, betrayal, political struggles, and personal tragedies that would break most people, and yet they managed to find peace. Not because they lived in a perfect world, but because they discovered the power to create peace within themselves. They believed that true strength isn't about controlling the world, because the world will always be unpredictable. True strength is about mastering yourself, your mind, your emotions, your perspective. In this video, we're going to dive deep into 15 life-changing lessons from Stoicism that can completely transform the way you face challenges. These lessons are not dusty ideas from ancient philosophy books. They are practical tools that can be applied to everyday life, whether you're dealing with stress at work, conflict in relationships, or uncertainty about the future. And if you take them seriously, they can help you remain calm, steady, and unshaken, no matter what storms life throws your way. So, if you're ready to take control of your emotions, build a steady heart, and see life with clarity, keep watching until the end. And if these ideas resonate with you, consider subscribing. Because this isn't just about following a channel, it's about committing to a journey of growth. It's about building the inner strength and peace that Stoicism can help you cultivate every single day. The first lesson is one of the most important. It's not what happens, it's how you see it. Think about that for a moment. Most of us assume that the world directly controls our emotions, that happiness, sadness, peace, or frustration come from the events happening around us. But the truth is, life itself is neutral. Events don't come with built-in meaning. They're just events. It's our interpretation of them that shapes how we feel. For example, a traffic jam doesn't make you angry by itself. What makes you angry is the story you attach to it. I'm going to be late. This always happens to me. I can't believe this road is so terrible. That narrative is what fuels the emotion, not the cars on the road. The same applies to a difficult conversation with your boss. It's not the words alone that trigger anxiety, it's the meaning you attach. This could ruin my career. They don't value me. This is a disaster. The event is the same, but the story you tell yourself changes everything about how you experience it. This is exactly what Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher, meant when he wrote, "The mind adapts and converts to its own purposes the obstacle to our acting." In other words, obstacles are not inherently good or bad, they become whatever your mind decides they are. And that realization is powerful. Because the moment you change how you see something, you change its impact on you. The challenge no longer feels like an insurmountable wall, it becomes a stepping stone. Instead of feeling defeated, you feel stronger, more resourceful, more in control. That shift in perspective is where peace begins. Of course, it's easier said than done. Most of us have been conditioned since childhood to react emotionally to the world around us. We believe that life is happening to us, and our only role is to react. That's why so many people get swept away by stress, anger, or frustration. They give the outside world full control over their inner state. But the Stoics showed us a different way. They understood that the only true freedom lies in mastering our responses. You can't always control the external world, but you can always control your inner one. Think about how many times you've acted impulsively, only to regret it later. Maybe you snapped at someone in anger, and hours later you wished you had stayed calm. Or maybe you let stress consume you over something small, and in hindsight, you realized it wasn't worth it. These are moments where we allowed the situation to dictate our emotions. But imagine if, instead, you had paused. Imagine if you had stepped back and asked yourself, how do I want to respond to this? That simple pause is where Stoic power lies. This practice is a kind of mindfulness, but not the kind most people think of. It's not about emptying your mind or sitting in silence. Stoic mindfulness is about becoming fully present, fully aware of your thoughts, and realizing that your emotions do not have to control you. In a fast-paced modern world, people often believe that peace comes from fixing everything around them, earning more money, solving every problem, avoiding all conflict. But peace doesn't come from controlling the world. As Carl Jung once said, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. That's where peace begins, not in changing the world, but in changing the way you relate to it. Now picture this, you're stuck in traffic again, rushing to an important meeting. The frustration rises, I'm going to be late. This is the worst. Why does this always happen? Your body tenses, your mind spins out of control. But what if, in that exact moment, you paused and asked yourself, what if I see this differently? Instead of seeing a traffic jam as wasted time, you could choose to see it as an opportunity. Time to listen to an audiobook, reflect on your goals, or simply practice patience. The external situation doesn't change, but your internal experience does. That is the core of Stoic philosophy, freedom in the way you choose to see the world. And once you embrace this, you discover something life-changing. You realize that you are not powerless. You are not at the mercy of events. You are responsible for your response. And with that realization comes freedom, true freedom. But here's the part people miss, this doesn't happen overnight. Mastery takes practice. It's like training a muscle. Every time you pause instead of reacting, you strengthen that muscle. Every time you challenge your old narratives, you break free a little more from emotional reactivity. Slowly, you start seeing events as they really are, neutral. Not good, not bad, just neutral. And only you decide the meaning they carry. Interestingly, modern psychology agrees with the Stoics on this. Cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, is one of the most effective psychological approaches today, and it's built on the same foundation. It teaches that what we believe shapes how we feel. If you believe you're going to fail, your anxiety rises. If you believe you can handle the challenge, your body calms. The same event, different interpretation, creates completely different emotions. The takeaway is simple but life-changing. If you can control your interpretation, you can control your emotional state. You may not be able to control every storm in life, but you can always choose how to sail through it. And this, my friends, is where the true power lies. Stoicism is not just some old philosophy locked away in dusty books. It is a map, a living guide to navigating the challenges that life throws at us every single day. The beauty of it is this: Stoicism does not demand that we change the external world, because so often, the world is beyond our control. Instead, it invites us to shift something far more powerful, our perception. Think about it. You and I cannot stop storms from coming, but we can learn how to sail through them. You cannot stop people from criticizing you, but you can control how much of that criticism you allow into your heart. The essence of Stoicism is not resistance to reality, but the art of embracing it and shaping your response in a way that brings strength, calm, and clarity. Life itself is neutral. The traffic jam, the missed flight, the unexpected argument with someone you care about, these things in themselves are neither good nor bad. It's our interpretation that gives them meaning. It's the story we tell ourselves about those events that causes suffering or brings peace. You see, one person stuck in traffic might say, "This is unbearable, my whole day is ruined," while another might say, "This is an opportunity to listen to my favorite podcast or reflect quietly." The same external event, yet two very different internal experiences. That difference doesn't come from the world, it comes from the mind. So, the next time you face a challenge, pause and ask yourself, what story am I telling myself about this? Is it serving me, or is it making the situation worse? If not, how can I rewrite it? When you begin to reflect like this, you realize that the key to peace has always been within you. The practice is not about perfection. You won't suddenly become a monk untouched by stress overnight. But with practice, you learn to shift perspective, to take ownership of your reactions, and to build that quiet strength that the Stoics carried with them through wars, exile, betrayal, and personal tragedy. Now, let's look deeper at the stories we tell ourselves. Because if we're honest, most of the suffering in life doesn't come from what's happening in the present, it comes from the endless narratives our mind invents. How often do you find yourself trapped in a spiral of thoughts? A small inconvenience, say, someone didn't reply to your message, suddenly becomes a full-blown drama in your head. You begin to think, did I say something wrong? Are they upset with me? Maybe they don't value me. Within minutes, your heart races, anxiety creeps in, and yet nothing has actually happened. No one said a single harsh word. Nothing in the real world has changed. What's changed is the story you created in your own mind. Stoicism teaches us a powerful truth: you are not your thoughts. The mind is a narrator, constantly creating tales, often filled with fear, worry, or worst-case scenarios. Seneca, one of the great Stoics, warned us about this when he said, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." Think about that. Most of our pain doesn't come from actual events, it comes from imagining what might happen. Anxiety before a presentation, for example, usually comes not from the event itself but from thoughts like, what if I forget my lines? What if they laugh? What if I fail? These are not facts. They are possibilities, projections, illusions. Yet, when we buy into them, our bodies respond as if they are real, our hearts race, our palms sweat, our stomach knots. Psychologists today call this catastrophizing, the habit of imagining the worst possible outcome. It's a survival instinct gone overboard. Once, it kept our ancestors alive by preparing them for danger. But in our modern world, it often holds us hostage. The mind becomes like a movie projector, overlaying a dramatic, fearful script onto ordinary life. A simple email becomes, my boss hates me, I'm going to lose my job. A passing glance from a stranger becomes, they're judging me, I don't belong here. Yet, when we pause to examine the evidence, most of the time these stories collapse. They were never reality to begin with. This is where mindfulness, closely tied to Stoicism, comes into play. The practice is not to deny your thoughts or suppress your feelings. It is to observe them with calm detachment. When a thought arises, I'm not good enough or this will end badly, you step back and ask, is this true? Is this fact, or is it fear? Marcus Aurelius once wrote, the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. In other words, what you dwell on shapes who you become. If your thoughts are always painted with failure, fear, and rejection, your life will feel like failure, fear, and rejection. But if you choose to rewrite those stories, to replace I'm terrible at this with I'm still learning, or this is too hard with this is a chance to grow, your entire experience of life shifts. Carl Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. This is exactly what happens with the hidden stories we tell ourselves. They often come from old fears, past experiences, or insecurities, running quietly in the background, shaping our choices and emotions without us realizing it. But once we bring these stories into the light, once we recognize them for what they are, we take back control. Take social anxiety as an example. You walk into a party and your mind immediately says, I won't fit in. What if I say something stupid? What if they all judge me? Before anyone has spoken a word, you've already painted a picture of rejection and embarrassment. That story has nothing to do with reality, it has everything to do with your own fears. And yet, by believing it, you make it feel real. The Stoics would remind us here, your thoughts are not facts. They are interpretations. And interpretations can be questioned, re-examined, and reshaped. The truth is, every negative story you carry can be rewritten. Not with lies, not with false positivity, but with perspective. Instead of I can't handle this, you might tell yourself, I may not control what happens, but I control how I respond. Instead of this is the end, you might say, this is the beginning of something new. Slowly, story by story, you reclaim your freedom. Because ultimately, the mind can be either a prison or a path to freedom. We all know what it feels like to be trapped by our thoughts, stuck in fear, regret, or overthinking. Sometimes it feels like our circumstances are the cage, the job we dislike, the relationship that drains us, the struggles we face. But the Stoics would ask us to look deeper. What if the true prison isn't outside, but inside? What if it's not the job, the relationship, or the circumstance, but the way your mind interprets it? Epictetus, a man who lived as a slave before becoming a philosopher, taught that even in chains, he had freedom, the freedom to choose his attitude, his thoughts, his perspective. That kind of freedom can never be taken from you. This is the essence of Stoicism, the realization that no matter how chaotic or harsh the external world may be, you always retain the inner freedom to decide how you respond. And in that freedom lies your strength, your peace, your unshakable power. Real freedom is not found in controlling the world, nor in bending every circumstance to match our desires. Real freedom begins when we stop resisting the flow of life, when we accept reality as it is, and when we realize that while we cannot always decide what happens, we can always decide how we respond. The more we resist, the more tightly we bind ourselves to frustration and suffering. But the more we learn to accept and understand, the more we discover that the door to freedom has always been unlocked, waiting for us to walk through it. Think about how much of your suffering has come not from the situation itself, but from the story your mind created around it. You expected one outcome and received another. You wanted life to go in a certain direction, but it took a turn you didn't anticipate. And instead of adjusting, instead of flowing with it, you resisted. That resistance built into frustration, into anger, into anxiety. And in the end, you weren't fighting the situation, you were fighting your own mind. Circumstances may trigger the spark, but it is your interpretation, your perception, and your response that fuel the fire. Take something ordinary, like being cut off in traffic. One person might explode with rage, clench the wheel, and carry that anger into the rest of their day. Another might simply breathe, accept that the world is full of careless drivers, and move on without losing their peace. The same event, two completely different experiences. That is the essence of inner freedom. It doesn't mean you suppress your feelings or pretend you are unaffected. It means you pause, you examine what you feel, and you consciously choose the response that serves you best, both in that moment and in the long run. The Stoics never argued for a life of cold emotional suppression. They never told us to feel nothing. Instead, they taught us to look at our emotions as signals, as messengers, and then to decide wisely what to do with them. That is what makes freedom internal. It is not about controlling the world, it is about mastering the self. When you reach this point, something powerful happens. Life no longer dictates your state of mind. The storms may rage around you, but they no longer determine whether you feel at peace. The world doesn't control you anymore, because you've learned to control your response to it. And this is where the deepest shift occurs. You begin to understand that peace does not require perfect conditions. You don't need life to always go your way, or for every person to treat you fairly, or for every day to be free of stress. You can experience peace in the midst of chaos. As Epictetus said, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. That truth alone can change a life. Because it means you no longer need to wait for happiness. You can find it here, now, even in imperfection. Think back to moments when you felt trapped. Perhaps it was a relationship that drained you, or a job that suffocated you, or a season of life where everything felt heavy and unchangeable. You felt powerless, stuck, imprisoned. But the Stoics would argue that the real prison wasn't the relationship, or the job, or the season, it was your perception. You had accepted the story your mind told you, there's no way out. I have no choice. This is how it has to be. That story became the bars of your prison. Yet if you look closer, the lock was never real. The key was always in your hand. It lay in shifting your perspective. Epictetus himself lived this truth. Born a slave, he had no control over his external conditions. His body was not free, but his mind was untouchable. He realized that no master, no circumstance, no hardship could ever steal his inner freedom unless he surrendered it. He chose to claim peace, even in chains. He chose to focus not on what he couldn't control, but on what he always could, his thoughts, his judgments, and his responses. This is why his life still echoes today as one of the purest examples of Stoic freedom. And this truth is timeless. Our modern world constantly whispers the opposite, that happiness lies in the perfect job, the perfect partner, the perfect home, or the right amount of money. We chase these things, believing they will grant us peace. But the Stoics remind us that real happiness is not purchased, nor gifted, nor achieved through circumstances. It is cultivated from within. It is the mastery of your own mind. Once you take responsibility for your inner world, the outer world loses its power to dictate your peace. Even psychology now confirms what Stoicism taught centuries ago, that our growth, our healing, and our freedom lie in our responses. Life doesn't need to be perfect for you to feel joy. You are not doomed to be a victim of your circumstances, you are the creator of your experience. The world outside will always be uncertain. People will hurt you, challenges will come, losses will strike, and setbacks will test your strength. But none of these things need to define your emotional state. Your peace is never at the mercy of events unless you hand it over. And then there is fear, the great thief of peace. How often have you found yourself awake at night, spinning in circles of what if? What if I fail? What if I'm rejected? What if everything falls apart? Your mind races through every worst-case scenario, convincing you that disaster is not only possible, but certain. The pressure builds in your chest, your body reacts as if the danger is real, and yet, none of it has happened. It exists only in your imagination. Seneca captured this perfectly: we suffer more in imagination than in reality. Most fears are illusions, projections of the future, not reflections of the present. We imagine rejection before it happens. We imagine failure before we even try. We imagine catastrophe, when in truth, most of those fears never come to pass. And even when challenges do arise, they are rarely as devastating as we pictured them. Fear stretches reality until it feels unbearable, but when the moment arrives, we often discover that we are stronger, calmer, and more capable than our imagination led us to believe. The Stoics understood this. They taught that fear is natural, but it is not final. Fear is a reaction, but courage is a decision. You cannot stop the initial feeling of fear from arising, but you can choose how to meet it. You can decide to act, even while fear whispers in your ear. You can decide to see fear for what it is, not truth, not prophecy, but simply a story your mind is telling about what might happen. And like every story, you can choose whether to believe it. Think of the last time you were nervous about something important, an interview, a conversation, a presentation. Before it happened, your mind painted every possible failure. But when the moment came, wasn't it often far less frightening than you imagined? The fear lived mostly in your mind, not in reality. That is the nature of fear. It is a shadow, not the object itself. Once you learn to step beyond it, you begin to see how many doors were always open, how many opportunities were always there, waiting for you to walk through. This is the freedom Stoicism offers. Not the freedom of a world that bends perfectly to your will, but the freedom of a mind that remains unshaken no matter what the world does. The freedom to feel peace in chaos, the freedom to act in the face of fear, the freedom to know that no circumstance can define you unless you allow it. The prison you believed in was never real. The key was always in your hand.